First off, a huge thanks to Quincy and the whole research team for finding this story. I mean, wow.
Yeah, this one's a doozy.
Welcome back to Canada News Summaries, Episode 6. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jane.
And today we are tackling Trump's reaction to Canada's potential retaliation to his tariff threats.
Buckle up.
Oh yeah, this is going to be a wild ride. If you guys are liking these Canada News Summaries, hit that follow button and share it with your friends.
We'd really appreciate it.
So Jane Trump saying he subsidizes Canada over $100 billion a year. What's the deal with that?
Well, it all starts with Trump, right? He's threatening to slap a 25% tariff on all imports from Canada and Mexico.
25%.
25%. And he's citing things like illegal immigration and fentanyl trafficking as the reasons.
Interesting. So how did Canada respond to that?
Well, Doug Ford, the premier of Ontario, he basically said, hold on a second, you want to play that game. Ontario might just cut off energy exports to about 1.5 million Americans living in states right across the border.
Whoa. Okay, so playing hardball, I can see why Trump felt the need to clap back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's where that subsidy claim comes in. He says the U.S. subsidizes Canada to the tune of over $100 billion each year.
Okay, $100 billion with a B. That's a pretty serious chunk of change. I gotta ask, though, is there anything to back up that claim?
Well, it's a bold statement for sure. The International Monetary Fund, they define a subsidy as a government giving resources without getting an equal contribution back.
So like free money, basically.
Kind of. Think of it like direct handouts, special tax breaks, things like that. Now, when you look at the actual trade relationship between the U.S. and Canada, things get a little more complicated.
More complicated? How so?
Well, for starters, in 2022, the U.S. actually had a trade deficit with Canada.
Meaning?
Meaning they bought way more from Canada than they sold to Canada. We're talking a deficit of $53.5 billion.
Okay, so already that subsidy claim seems a little shaky.
Exactly. And then you look at investments. Canadian investments in the U.S. are way higher than the other way around. Canadian direct investment in the U.S. is a whopping $1.1 trillion.
Trillion with a T.
Trillion with a T. Well, U.S. direct investment in Canada is only $618.2 billion.
So not even close.
Nope. And on top of that, Canada is selling more and more services to the U.S. every year. So when you factor all that in, the word subsidy doesn't really seem to fit, does it?
Doesn't seem to fit at all. Ford even called Trump's claim baloney.
Which honestly is the most Canadian way to respond.
It really is. So what's next? Is Ford just going to let this slide?
Not a chance. He's looking at some pretty strong countermeasures right now. The one getting a lot of attention is potentially restricting electricity exports to Michigan, New York, and Minnesota.
Those are some pretty big states to just cut off. Would that even be possible?
Well, those states rely pretty heavily on Canadian power, so it would definitely send a message, and it could get messy real fast.
I bet. But wouldn't that hurt Canadian businesses too? Seems like a risky move.
Oh, it's definitely risky. There's a lot of risk on both sides, which really just highlights how interconnected the U.S. and Canadian economies are. We rely on each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So what else is Ford considering?
Well, he's also thinking about holding back on exporting those Canadian minerals that are super important for making electric vehicle batteries.
Yeah, I've heard those are in high demand right now.
Huge demand. So that would be another big pressure point. And then there's limiting U.S. companies from bidding on Ontario government contracts and even stopping the LCBO from buying American alcohol.
The LCBO.
The Liquor Control Board of Ontario. It's actually the world's largest buyer of alcohol. So that would be a pretty significant move.
I had no idea. Now, all of these, they're still in the works, right?
Right. Nothing's set in stone yet.
Okay.
But they're being described as escalation maneuvers for a reason.
Escalation maneuvers. It sounds like something out of a war movie.
Well, in a way, it kind of is. It's basically a game of leverage, each side trying to up the ante and force the other to back down.
A high-stakes game of chicken.
Exactly. And this is where things get dangerous, because a full-blown trade war would hurt both the U.S. and Canada.
Yeah, nobody wins in that scenario.
Exactly. The U.S. and Canada have this deep economic bond. We need each other. Any damage to one side is going to ripple across the border and hurt the other.
So in the end, it seems like everyone's going to lose if this keeps escalating.
That's the big takeaway here. This isn't a game with winners and losers. We need to find a way to de-escalate the situation.
Well said. So Jane, do you think Ford's response is justified? Or is he playing with fire?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's no easy answer. It's complicated. There's a lot at stake. And honestly, I don't envy the people who have to make these decisions.
I hear that. So for all of you listening out there, this situation could have some real-world consequences for you. How do you think this trade war could play out? Will it affect your electricity bill? Will certain products become harder to find?
These are all things to consider, and we want to know what you think.
Exactly. Jump into the comments, share your thoughts with us, tag us in your social media posts. Let's get a conversation going about this.
The more voices, the better.
And while you're at it, don't forget to follow us and share this episode with your friends.
Yeah.
Spread the word.
We'll be back next week with another deep dive into the Canadian news landscape. Until then, stay informed, and as always, thanks for listening. See you next time.